Years ago, there was an altar server at my last parish, and he asked me, like, Father, what's your favorite liturgy throughout the course of the year? And it wasn't a particular thing like, Easter Sunday or Christmas Day. It was like kind of like a situation like this, where people are parked on lawns and in a cemetery or on the street and all sorts of things, and just like a packed house. It's like a movie on opening night, So just the energy is just fantastic. I find with the Easter season, it's kind of confusing. I thought this even long before I became a priest and even before I became a seminarian. Of all the different seasons throughout the course of the liturgical year, in terms of confusing seasons, like Easter is like pretty much number one. Most people don't know what to do. They don't even know what to think, So most people are celebrating, but not for the right reason necessarily. I'm just celebrating the fact that, like, thank goodness Lent is over, right? Even if people have some intuition, like I suppose I'm supposed to think about the resurrection and celebrate that. Like, what's their notion of the resurrection? One day in the future, there'll be a big family gathering in a meadow with a babbling brook, angels playing harps, like barf, right? So that's not really what we believe. Is that really what we're celebrating, right? So something's kind of missing there. So what I want to do is kind of flesh it out. Like, what's the spirit of Easter? What's the spirit of the Easter season? By looking at the gospel, right? So just in terms of broad strokes. We come to the end of Holy Week, and preceding that, there's Palm Sunday and Holy Thursday and Good Friday, and with Good Friday in particular, the peak of human dysfunction. So we think about violence committed, vis-a-vis the Lord by the Roman soldiers. You think about pride and arrogance on the part of the scribes and the Pharisees. You think about betrayal and abandonment on the part of the disciples, and the Lord takes all this on, and he dies. The Messiah, the very embodiment of hope, he suffers and dies on the cross. And that's how Good Friday kind of ends. But then, all of a sudden, the scene shifts, and the page turns. And all of a sudden, you have all these amazing stories of Christ in terms of his resurrected form, encountering people in their woundedness and in their brokenness. So, for example, you think about Mary Magdalene, right? Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for? Mary Magdalene at the empty tomb. She's led from a place of despondency and despair to this place of new hope. I can begin to hope again. I can begin to believe again through this encounter with the resurrected Christ. You think about St. Thomas, like doubting Thomas, right? My Lord and my God. He's led to this place of belief, the greatest articulation of faith in the divinity of Christ throughout the entire gospel. Again, my Lord and my God. Think about St. Peter, right? Peter, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? 3 times. Feed my lambs, feed my sheep. In the aftermath of his betrayal of the Lord on Holy Thursday, he's reaffirmed in terms of his vocation. All the old promises still apply. You're still called to be the first pope. You're still called to be the fledgling leader of this new church that I've founded, right? And all these different stories, you're meant to see sort of a pattern, right? So Lent is a time for uncovering that which is. Hidden faults, hidden sins. I didn't realize how much I need the Lord. I didn't realize my life is a big open wound. But by the end of Lent, I'm acutely aware of that, ideally, hopefully. But then it's meant to lead into Easter. And what you find in Easter is a prolonged period of healing and restoration and redemption. And that's why it's kind of no coincidence that Easter lasts for 50 days. It's not just a one-day thing, right? It's not just a one-time thing. It's 50 days, even longer than the 40 days of Lent. And even that is instructive, right? It tells us something about the nature of healing that the Lord wants to bring to our hearts. Anytime someone proposes you a quick fix, you want to be distrustful of that, right? You don't really want that, actually. It doesn't do justice to your story, the story of your own life, the story of your own woundedness, right? What you are looking for deep down, and what the Lord wants to give to you, is not a quick fix, it's not a cure, it's deep and authentic healing. All those places that you're wounded, all those places which are lost and in the desert, if you will, the Lord wants to reach you in all those different places until you're fully healed, fully human, and therefore fully alive. Right? There's this great quote which really kind of emphasizes this thing. I came across it the other day. It kind of goes like this. Beautiful people don't just happen. Beautiful people don't just happen. If you think about the people you admire the most, these people have suffered great loss, they have loved deeply, and they have known difficult things. But they have worked through all these things. And in working through these things, they have learned deep love, deep compassion, deep knowledge, and deep wisdom. And that has made all the difference in the world. So again, beautiful people, they don't just happen. If you think about it, all the people you admire in this world, They have suffered great loss. They have loved deeply. They have known difficult things. And yet they have worked through all these things. And in working through these things, they have learned deep love, deep compassion, deep knowledge, and deep wisdom. And that has made all the difference in the world. I want to give you a concrete example to kind of flesh this out. This is an example from my own life. So some people have heard this story in different circumstances, but it's nice for this occasion, right? So I studied to be a priest at St. Augustine Seminary in Scarborough, Ontario, and it was like 6 years, which is like really long. Law school is only 3 years, go figure. Anyways. In the middle of that, there's what's called the internship year, where you're kind of placed in a parish and you're kind of learning what it's like to be a priest without actually being a priest, And so I was placed in this parish where the rectory was attached to the church. And it just so happened to be that my room was directly across from the pastor's room. And both our doors were open, so he could see me and I could see him. And this thing I'm about to tell you, this has happened throughout the course of the internship year, but I wasn't used to it at first. So I'm telling you the story about how it initially began to happen. So what he did, pretty soon after we met, was like, he'd look at me in my room, again, our doors were open, and say to me, Eric, something is bothering you. Something is bothering you, we should talk. And in my mind, I thought, nothing's bothering me. And it wasn't like I was lying to him. In retrospect, I was burying stuff, partially because I'm Chinese. Can't overlook that. But also because we tend to do that, right? I want to make sure I phrase this right. We tend to do that, right? We tend to get used to feeling sad and having no hope. I'm used to feeling broken and sad and lost and confused. I'm used to people not listening, such that when the question comes across in the context of conversation, in the context of relationship, what is bothering you? Is anything bothering you? It doesn't trigger anything because that place in my heart has long died. I don't know if you can relate to that, but I think that was a situation in retrospect. But give him credit, he kept on pressing. We should talk, something is bothering you. And eventually, after much cajoling, he'll bring me into his room. He'd be sitting in his chair, I'll be sitting in my chair, and be like, okay, so what is it? What's bothering you? In my mind, I'll be thinking, well, I get to go one thing. But still, he would press. Until finally, it was like, oh gosh, there is a thing. And it's not just this little thing, it's like a huge thing, which, again, I haven't averted my eyes to, like, for years, for decades, maybe, And we would talk about it for hours, and a lot of tears would be shed, ugly cry, all that stuff. And I gotta tell you, at the end of that conversation, it wasn't like, well, now I have a complete understanding of my situation and what to do going forward to have full healing and restoration. It wasn't that. Oftentimes we would end these conversations with some variation of, like, I would say to him, like, look, first of all, thank you for this, but now I feel like I have some measure of hope. I feel like I can take, like, one more step in a spiritual journey to kind of face, like, the next day. That's all it was. That's all it was. And we had that type of conversation pretty much day after day, week after week, for the course of the entire year. And I gotta tell you, friends, that whole thing, it really influenced my whole approach to ministry going forward, now that I'm a priest myself. Because there's a couple things I want you to notice there, right? First of all, the importance of journeying with. Like, what was the thing that was really helpful in that moment? Like, it wasn't so much like wise and clever sayings. This guy was wise and he was clever. He had multiple sayings, right? But I didn't need, like, a philosopher. I didn't need a theologian. I needed someone who was willing to journey with me into those dark places. The way I often think about it, like, you can be by yourself and name your pain. Like, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm upset, whatever the case may be, and even name the reason corresponding to that experience. I'm sad for this reason. If you do it by yourself in your room, you don't feel better, maybe you even feel worse. But that's the thing about God's love, right? God's love can come to us in an unmediated fashion, but typically God's love is incarnational, mediated through the holy people of God, the mystical body of Christ. So what happens, what is healing, what is redemptive, is if you find someone that you can trust, someone in whose love you have confidence, and actually experience and relive the thing in raw detail. I don't just name my pain, I feel sad, I feel angry, I name that place which I think is going to destroy me, and hopefully this person doesn't abandon me in that moment. And if that person doesn't, that's the thing that's healing, that's the thing that's redemptive. It's this recurring experience that we're all meant to have, where I can be weak and vulnerable before my friends, and he or she does not reject me. We need that over and over again to deal with the traumas we sustain over the course of our lives. Right? But the other corresponding point I came to kind of realize was that there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. It takes guts and it takes courage to live your faith authentically. So many times we're going through life, I'm sure you can relate to this. We're going through life, something happens, something impinges on our hearts, and all of a sudden we feel hurt, we feel sad, we feel angry. And what do? We pray for the Lord to take it away. Take away my sadness, take away my pain, take away my hurt. But you can't live your faith at arm's length. How do you become great? How do you become beautiful in the order of grace? You need to suffer great loss. You need to know difficult things. And when you work through these things, you come to achieve deep love, compassion, understanding, all those things we cited in the original quotes, right? Now, we have to take it one step further, necessarily so, right? Salvation is not simply a self-help program. Any kind of idea you have in your mind that I achieve salvation or redemption through my own power, my gifts and talents, and the sheer force of the will, that ain't true. Eventually, it comes to the point where, like, look, I've done all that I can, not because I lack a try, but I need the Lord. Not even a little bit, but like desperately. It's the image of the multiplication of the loaves and the fish, right? 5,000 people who are starving. All I have are 5 loaves and 2 fish. It's all that I've got. I gave all that I have. But it's nowhere near enough to feed the multitude. So, Lord, you need to come in and make this thing happen. And he does, and he will, right? The example that comes to mind, I did this funeral here at the parish way back when. And if you've ever been to a funeral that I've done here or other places, usually I'll say to the family, look, if you want to come in and talk, and obviously that's better, we can talk about the person face to face in terms of what you remember, what you loved about this person. But a lot of times, because there's a lot going on with the planning of the funeral, people will just submit a bio, which is totally fine, right? But what was unusual in this circumstance was that usually a bio is written by like one person, maybe like 2 people. But this was a situation where the brother of the deceased said, look, mass email to all the family and friends. Father needs some points for the homily. Can everyone just kind of submit points? And so all these people submitted points, and he put them together. He gave me this email, and there's this long list of just like page after page about this person that everyone loves, right? And so what I did, I tried to group them into like headings and themes and stuff like that. And what was interesting was that everyone was kind of saying the same thing, you know? And not in a generic sort of way. Oh, he loved people, and people loved him back, right? There was that, right? He did love people, and people loved him back. He loved the poor. He loved young people. He was this really dynamic person. All these different things. But I remember one thing, it sounds weird, one thing that really stuck out, and again, multiple people kind of affirmed this point, this dynamic person of great love, he would tell jokes, but never at anyone's expense. He would tell jokes and never at anyone's expense. And again, multiple people said that. And I thought, that's kind of unusual. Because what do we typically do? We tell jokes at people's expense, right? We rip people behind their backs to their face, but we say, I'm just joking. But it actually betrays a certain meanness in your heart, right? And here's this guy, he loved to joke. He loved to laugh. He loved to make people laugh. But it was never at anyone's expense. And if you read between the lines, you didn't get the sense that, like, gosh, I'm just dying to tell that sarcastic and biting joke, but I'm holding back for the sake of virtue. This guy, like, his heart was filled with goodness and beauty and love. And out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So I joke, but never at anyone's expense. Anyways, I was reflecting on this person of goodness and authenticity and integrity and love. That might sound kind of weird, but I was just kind of thinking to myself, well, gosh, here's someone who has hopes and dreams and obviously massive gifts and talents and a real blessing to the people of God. And then he suffers, especially near the end of his life, this prolonged illness, and then he dies. And the idea is that, what do you do with that? What's God's response to that? What's our response to that? And the thing I want to impress upon you, friends, is that our answer must not be, well, don't worry, one day there'll be a barbecue in heaven. No. The answer has to be the resurrection, but properly understood. It's hard to find statements and quotes which really kind of provoke one's imagination in a positive way with regards to the resurrection, but I think I got one, right? So I found this in the context of a video, I think yesterday, actually. So basically, Sister Miriam James Heidland, really prominent Catholic speaker in the context of social media and that sort of thing. And last year, she gave this prolonged series of videos, kind of giving an online Lenten retreat. And if you look it up on YouTube and you type Sister Miriam and like Restore, she has a series of videos. I haven't watched them all, but I watched like a few. And she ends this series of videos with this statement, right? So I'm just going to paraphrase what she says. So basically what she says, when I was preparing this retreat, all sorts of faces came to mind. So I was thinking about the people who would receive this, who would be changed by God's grace. And just know I've been praying for you. Obviously, I've been praying for you. But I was thinking about it, and I might meet some of you while we're here during this life on earth, but most of you I will not meet. But I hope to meet you one day, right? And at this point, she got kind of emotional, because one thing you know about Sister Miriam, or one thing you should know about Sister Miriam, she suffered great trauma in her life. She's one of these beautiful people who has suffered great loss and known difficult things, right? And so she's faced these things with courage and fortitude, as a result of which she's achieved all manner of spiritual perfection, but still, loose threads. I'm still left wanting, I'm still hurting. And so she's speaking from this place, and she goes, I know I will meet you on the other side of the veil. I know I'll meet you at the other side of the veil where love and goodness and beauty and healing flow for all eternity. That place that, in the words of C.S. Lewis, is like a book where every page, every chapter gets better and better and better, where you continue to grow in your hopes and dreams and the realization of all your imaginations and all your deep desires. That place with regards to which this place is merely a foretaste. I long for that place. I pray to be in that place. And I hope you'll see you there.